A pleasant day to everyone. Today we will explore another theory of learning, which is the cognitive constructivist learning. I'm DONNEL PLACER, a PhD CIN student. But before that, let me share with you this quote from John Dewey that education is not an affair of telling and being told, but an active and constructive process. Education and learning as an active and constructive process will be the focus of this constructivist theory. So in the field of learning, constructivism is under the broad heading of what we call as the cognitive science, or the study of how people learn, remember, and interact, often with a strong emphasis of mental processes and modern technologies. On the other hand, if we talk of the scientific study of mental processes such as learning, perceiving, remembering, using language, reasoning, and solving problems, we refer it to the cognitive psychology. But the common denominator between the two fields is more on learning. But on constructivism views that learning is a result of mental construction. So focusing on constructivism as a learning theory, we describe learning as follows. First, learning as an active process. Second, learning as a construction of knowledge. Third, learning as a process of adjustment. Fourth, learning as influenced by social and cultural context. So, who are the proponents of the constructivist learning theory? Here are the proponents of constructivist learning theory, but we will focus on the works of Jean Piaget and Lev Vygotsky. So the constructivist theories are classified into two. We have the cognitive constructivism by Jean Piaget and the social constructivism by Lev Vygotsky. Now, we will go to the cognitive constructivism, and according to this theory, learning is an active process in which learners construct new ideas or concepts based upon their current or past knowledge and the cognitive structures. So, therefore, learning is relative to their stage of cognitive development, and we will discover this more by understanding the theory of Piaget on cognitive development, the mental process of learning, and the schema theory. So Jean Piaget's theory of cognitive development is on the age-related developmental stages. It has four stages. First is the sensory motor, in which the child understands world through sense and actions. And for the pre-operational, the child understands world through language and mental images. For the concrete operational, we have the child understands world through logical thinking and categories. And for the formal operations is the last stage. The child understands that the world through hypothetical thinking and scientific reasoning. And and he has developed already abstract logic and potential for mature moral reasoning. So this Piaget's theory of cognitive development can give teachers approximate guidance concerning the level of complexity that might be expected in a child's thought process at approximate stages in their development. But another aspect of Piaget's work is concerned with the growth of knowledge and understanding and the ways in which new information is dealt by the young learners. He describes the two basic processes of which form the process of adjustment. They are the assimilation and the accommodation. The assimilation is the process whereby the new knowledge is incorporated into existing mental structures. On the other hand, accommodation refers to the process whereby mental structures have to be altered in order to cope with the new experience. And if the two processes arrive at a stable state, there is no longer a conflict between the new and existing knowledge, and there's already a balance, and that is now the equilibration. So these processes illustrate how a child actively constructs his own knowledge. So the mind mediates input from the outside world to determine what he will learn. So this connects the new knowledge from the existing and the prior knowledge, or what we call as the schema. So this important role of schema will be highlighted in a theory called the schema theory. Okay, so the schema theory holds on to the belief that human beings understand the world by constructing models of it in their minds, and it is all about how we take in information and create schema. Okay, meaning these mental models and schema are our cognitive structures and providing tools for learning. So now, what's the difference between the two? When we say mental models, this is the form of basis of the schema theory, and it is considered the basic structure of cognition. They are the basis of all reasoning processes, and they play a role in representing objects, sequence of events, psychological actions of daily life, and it is not permanent, but it is a tool for accommodation. On the other hand, schema refers to the theoretical multidimensional store. It is a unit of knowledge and understanding and skills. Unlike mental models, schema is permanent, meaning it is stored in the long-term memory. And if mental models are tools for accommodation, schema is a tool for assimilation. And to take a look at the schema and how it works towards learning, we have learned that schema is a theoretical, multidimensional store for innumerable items of knowledge or framework with numerous nodes and numerous connections between nodes. So each node, there is a discrete information or idea that is in a form of an image, a sound, a smell, a feeling, and so on. So each node is connected to other nodes. There's no limit and no restrictions, and resulting to connections if the link is meaningful and personal. So now, the more the connections, the more the construction has taken place and the more knowledge and understanding has been gained, thus learning has taken place. And it is in the adding of the schemas and connecting them to other items that made learning a constructivist learning. So this can be possible through the three mental processes of assimilation, accommodation, and equilibration. So to visualize a representation of a schema, take a look at this egg schema, which can be seen having numerous links to other sub-schemas. So this is just an attempt to illustrate the schema, and this is only a tiny proportion of a whole knowledge base of an individual. So now let's move on to the additional important dimension of constructivist learning, which is the social constructivism. Its emphasis is on the belief that social interaction is crucial to the constructivist learning. So social factors contribute to the construction of knowledge and understanding of the learners. So social constructivism will be tackled by the elements of language and dialogue, the GPD and scaffolding, situated learning, and authentic activity. So for social constructivism, it gives high priority to language in the process of intellectual development. Through language, dialogue becomes possible, and it serves as a vehicle by which ideas are considered, shared, and developed. Also, schemas form the basis of any contribution to a dialogue. Thus, a knowledge and understanding can be constructed. So, the opportunity and experience to have a dialogue can be possible by the guide and support of the more knowledgeable other. So it can be a teacher, an adult, or any person, since most learning does not only takes place in the school. Any social interaction with anybody at all may well lead to a learning. So the support and assistance of the more knowledgeable other can be referred to as scaffolding, which is related to the theory of Vygotsky. So this is the Vygotsky's cognitive development theory, which believes that cognitive abilities are socially guided and constructed. So the role of the more knowledgeable other, like the teacher, stimulates dialogue to individuals and groups and supports the development of understanding. So this role, if it is in a planned way, is called scaffolding, or the process of giving support to the learners. So to fully understand scaffolding, so we need to take a look at what we call the ZPD, or the zone of proximal development. So here is a diagram. It is a point at which a child has partly mastered a skill but can act more effectively with the assistance of a more skilled adult or peer. So, another is that the process of learning involves moving into and across the zone and looking forward to the next level of understanding, which will involve a similar journey through a newly created zone. And another major point of social constructivist theory is the belief that learning takes place in a context. So, what does it mean? It means it refers to the situated learning. So, what does situated learning means? It means that if the context is not familiar to the learner, learning will not necessarily proceed smoothly. Learning can be situated in social and cultural settings. Skills, knowledge, and understanding, which are learned and even mastered in one context, may not necessarily be transferred successfully to another. And if a learning activity falls beyond the cultural understanding of the learner, learning is likely to be less successful. So, looking at that illustration, when we say situated learning, in order for the children to effectively understand and relate to their experiences, teachers must take note of the differences in their cultural domains. So there are learners who are brought up in the urban environment, some from rural environments. So for example, children brought up in rural environment with little experience of city life might will find it difficult to understand and learn from the issues like overcrowded housing and parents who are fearful of letting their children play and roam freely outside. Thus, there is a link between good quality learning and learning being situated. And to make pupils relate to their own experience, there is a need to provide them authentic learning tasks. These are the tasks which pupil can relate to their own experience, link to their culture, and the tasks that give them familiar context. Okay, so another essential element of cognitive constructivist learning is the understanding of metacognition, which comes from the word meta, which means beyond, and the Latin word cognoscere, which means getting to know. So, to understand fully the metacognition, let's first know what cognition is. So, when say cognition, it refers to the mental activities and a high-level behavior unique to humans. On the other hand, metacognition is the awareness and understanding of own mental, cognitive processes and ways of learning, and it refers to one's knowledge and controls of own cognitive system. So it is also considered as cognition about cognition. So having this knowledge of control over cognitive system is considered as a metacognitive knowledge. So for example, so in learning spelling, how do students learn them? So teachers have different approaches, but children will find a way which helps them to learn a list of spelling, but many others will not. So they could have metacognitive awareness if they are aware that there are ways of approaching that spelling activity, and they find a more suitable approach. So some children will say they could learn spelling through photograph by repeatedly saying aloud, by writing and rewriting. So in order for them to develop their metacognition, the teacher should encourage children to experiment with different approaches and ask them to describe their own approaches. So aside from metacognition, we have also other mental activities. So the mental activities of individuals, students form particularly powerful source of influence on what is actually learned. We should remember that learning requires effort on the part of the learner, and without some effort and some mental activity, it is very unlikely that learning will take place. So for the teacher, the role of the teacher is to recognize the importance of mental activity in the learning. So there are many effective ways of encouraging children to engage with their work. So we have here getting close to the material content or activity of what it is hoped they will learn as possible, and then doing something with it, meaning the more the material content activities are closer to the learners, the more engagement they will develop. So engagement is the start of the process of learning, as supported by the five-stage model for learning by Reid et al. That learning comes first from engagement, then exploration, transformation, presentation, and last is the reflections. And so there are many effective ways of encouraging children to engage with their work. So we have them engage through the elements of prior knowledge, their level of difficulty, the social and cultural context, and the interest of the subject matter. So as a summary, the constructivist definition of learning refers to a relatively permanent change in mental associations as a result of experience. So the changes in mental associations are internal and cannot be observed. So there are four aspects of constructivist learning theory. We have first, learning is a process of interaction between what is known and what is to be learned. Two, learning is a social process. Three, learning is a situated process. Four, learning is a metacognitive process. And for the classroom practices, it is important that teachers should provide opportunities for mental activities and social interaction and make learning for the pupils to be meaningful. So, with that, I would like to end my presentation by my personal insight from this learning theory that the cognitive constructivist theory puts learners as the captain of their own learning success. Learning primarily takes place based on their active mental structures, social experiences, and engagement. I hope you have learned from this presentation. Thank you for listening.